Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. We're coming to you live from Mainnet 2023 in New York City. Joining me to round out our coverage, we have HQ Han, Ecosystem Lead at Protocol Labs, the core contributor to Filecoin, to discuss decentralized storage and its role in the AI revolution. HQ, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to TradeTalks.
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
You got it. Filecoin ecosystem, they unveiled their master plan earlier this year. Tell us what the significance of that is.
Yeah, so just for the audience that doesn't know, the Filecoin master plan actually lays out like the three-step kind of growth plan for Filecoin. And in particular, I think step 1 and step 2 is around like building really robust like storage markets. So like on step 1 is onboarding a large amount of storage capacity. Step 2 is generating the demand to use that capacity from basically like data users. And then step 3 is then trying to do more applications on top of this. So like in summary, I think I would kind of simplify it to kind of show like the progress of how you're building like the Filecoin ecosystem and the Filecoin stack to really replicate all the core services of the cloud. So what we're talking about is like basically storage, distribution, which is like linked to retrieval, and then the third pillar is around like being able to do compute jobs on top of the data, which in totality really represents like what the cloud is able to do for us today. So I think with that as a base, we currently made a lot of progress on like steps 1 and 2. So like the storage markets are really robust right now. We have about 10 exabytes of storage capacity, and we have about 1/10 of that being utilized right now. That kind of like puts us at about like almost 99% of total decentralized storage capacity in the whole space right now, and about 97% of basically data stored on decentralized storage. So it's like a huge like market share within the Web3 space. We're really looking forward to things that you mentioned about,
right,
like the compute stuff being able to fuel a lot of the AI use cases. And we also have a lot of progress on decentralized CDNs on the retrieval pillar that's coming out in Q4 this year.
So there's a burgeoning DeFi ecosystem that's emerging in the Filecoin ecosystem. What DeFi apps do you hope to see emerge in the future?
That's a really timely question. So just to recap, Filecoin launched the Filecoin virtual machine in March, sorry. So it's about like, I would say we are kind of at the 6-month anniversary mark right now. And what we've seen so far is tremendous progress that's being made in sort of like DeFi applications on Filecoin. So back to your topic here, we have about like, we just crossed like 10 million Filecoin being locked in the protocol, and about like 7 million of that is actually being loaned by the protocols to storage providers, aka like Filecoin miners, who are actually using those Filecoin to run their businesses on the network, providing storage capacity. So I think in essence, like we've seen a lot of growth in like certain use cases in DeFi and Filecoin that have been like really, really exciting, given that like the whole Web3 space is really interested in like starting to get really interested in real world use cases.
Right.
And then like to kind of see like you actually have these thousands of businesses on Filecoin that are real businesses running data centers and so on and so forth, and they're able to leverage DeFi to improve their operations. So I think that's really exciting. What I'm also excited about, and I'm really looking forward to it, is like even more kinds of DeFi applications that hopefully will like flourish on top of like the fundamentals that we have in place right now. So for example, I think if you kind of like think creatively, you can kind of imagine certain use cases whereby storage providers as businesses, they may be able to use like future block rewards, like their future revenue streams, for example, to get loans even today. So like these kind of things whereby, like when we go to school or like we get a mortgage,
right,
we're using like our future income to kind of like fund our present day operations. I think those things are like super interesting.
Right.
And we're just like honestly waiting for developers to like come and build all these kind of things around this like physical infrastructure network.
How will decentralized storage play a role in the AI revolution?
Oh, that's
another one you're passionate about.
That's a really good question, and I have so many thoughts about that. To be honest, So, okay, let me take a step back. I think if we kind of like look at AI from like a bird's eye view, you know, given all that we know so far, I think there's like two components that are really critical to, you know, the AI space. So I think first is like people will say that, okay, you need like the data. Like the data is really like the goal. You know, if you have data, you can then train the models and so on and so forth. And then I think the second one that people are always talking about is like the compute power, the compute resource that you need to, you know, train the models and continue to run the inferences on the models. So actually, when we look at like Filecoin and the foundation that it's trying to build, it actually weighs in really heavily into these two pillars as well of AI. So I think on the data side, it's, you know, like providing a very credible alternative and actually a very cost-effective alternative to store like petabyte scale data. On average, Filecoin is about like 30 times cheaper than centralized options.
Right.
So if you kind of think that, okay, data is gold, data is valuable, there's like a lot of data that we need to train models, then I believe that the search should be for like a cheaper alternative to archive data, and also something that, you know, is not necessarily controlled by like a single entity. So I think some of these benefits will definitely like resonate with like a lot of people quite intuitively on the sort of like data storage side. On the compute resources side, I think this is where like Filecoin and, you know, a lot of the decentralized networks, decentralized compute networks can really like weigh in as well, because as we know, it's very, very expensive to like train a model. Like I think Sam Altman said that for GPT-4, it cost him, he needed like 16,000 like NVIDIA GPUs, and it cost like north of like $100 million just to train that. So that's like crazy. And like, so what we're seeing is that AI is, at least for the large language models, is becoming more of like a big tech play, because they only they have like sufficient resources to, you know, like put to kind of like train like a huge model like ChatGPT. And like, so I think that's one bucket. And then like, if we go on to figure out that like, if you run the model, you also have like increasing costs. So I think if you try to like run like a ChatGPT query, it costs like 10 times more than a Google search, because like every time you're typing something and asking ChatGPT something, it has to like pretty much like spin up a neural network and like try to answer your questions and have this like back and forth discussion with you. And that's like also consuming compute resources. So if you kind of look at like Filecoin, where the third pillar of services is around like using like idle compute resources and like actually being able to use that to fuel AI use cases. So we have like a couple of startups and collaborations right now that are looking specifically into this. So when we have like storage nodes,
right,
as well as retrieval nodes, they actually have like compute power with them, and they can actually be used to run, you know, AI jobs.
Whether that's interesting. Like, so then you kind of have the energy component, like, you know, the climate component in it as well, which I think
exactly.
That's not spoken enough about when we talk about blockchain and you know, the environmental aspect of it. So if you can use that energy that's just being idle to help power this, it's very efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also presents like a very viable alternative.
Right.
And what I think is really important is that if we kind of play it out like a couple of years, we don't really want a situation whereby like small startups get crowded out, because like big tech is the only one that has like resources to all these like NVIDIA GPUs and CPUs and stuff like that. And you want like more of like a Cambrian explosion where you have like the innovation that, you know, we love about like the startup scene, being able to also develop like AI applications.
That's a good point. Yeah. All right, HQ, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Okay.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.